Most days I don't feel like I use this trans tape right. Like, I don't feel like I'd be putting it on correctly. 9 times out of 10, I feel like I'm consistently in this space where it's just good enough for me to not feel dysphoric, but not good enough for me to reach euphoric. You know what I'm saying? Fortunately, today is not that day. Today, I think I put the trans tape on perfectly. Like, it's giving exactly what I want it to give as far as, like, what I want my chest to look like, even post-chest surgery, whenever the fuck that happens. Probably after this fucking country implodes. I'm not trying to look like Mr. Universe over here. I do want titties. I just want them to be man titties. Dead ass trying to be Daddy Wolf up in this bitch, you know what I'm saying? In light of Pride, I did want to share my perspective on the erasure of trans men within the queer community or within society as a whole. This might be a controversial statement that ruffles up some feathers, but for me, I sometimes feel like my decision to transition was my final act of independence and bodily autonomy as a woman. My entire life I've lived outside of the gender binary because for my entire life I've always been gender nonconforming. I was always a tomboy. When I started getting romantically involved with women, I was always a stud. I was hyper masculine, overtly masculine in my presentation. So my relationship with my womanhood has always been like this push and pull that at the very worst of times became a lot of internalized violence that I would put myself through. Up until 2 years ago, the majority of my experience in the queer community was within this niche of hypermasculine or overtly masculine women. And that in and of itself is a very particular battle because the world is constantly saying that overtly masculine women shouldn't exist. They're an anomaly. They're weird. And the masculinity negates their womanhood. That was my battle most of the time with womanhood and with society in relation to my womanhood. You can be this overtly masculine person, this overtly muscular woman, and still be counted as a woman. And it took me forever to realize that though that statement is true, and though that is a reality, it's not my reality. I had to dismantle a metric fuckton of internalized transphobia that I had towards trans men to finally let that shit go. I've come to be hyper aware of the fact that we live not only in a patriarchal society, but a patriarchal society that is anti-woman, right? And because of that reality, women's experiences are erased, and the variation of ways that women can exist is whittled down to a very small space. A space that almost requires women to be devoid of masculine energy or masculine presentation. And I feel like one of the main reasons why trans men are so thoroughly erased from the conversation when it comes to trans visibility, when it comes to our existence within the queer community, when it comes to our existence within society as a whole, is because we break that mold. Not all trans men were masked butch lesbians and touch-me-nots and whatnot. But for the people who actually had to walk that path, I think it needs to be acknowledged that, one, we have a very strong thread and a possible avenue of community when it comes to masculine women and overtly masculine women. And two, we don't acknowledge the reality that, by extension, we further break the mold of what it means to be a woman in the eyes of society. And in some areas, more so than the existence of trans women. Again, we live in a patriarchal society that hates women and hates anything that women decide to do for themselves, to include opting out of womanhood, or at the very least, opting out of womanhood as society prescribes it. You're not allowed to be hypermasculine as a woman. You're not allowed to be muscular as a woman. That is a no-no. That's what you're not supposed to do. And the existence of masculine women breaks that mold and shows just how fake and fugazi such a requirement of half of the species. That shit is. And I think trans men only further prove that point, that like not only can women be masculine, they can also opt out of womanhood and not be women. We can also leave that behind and live in our truth as men and be a very different type of man, and be a type of man that has a very singular and particular perspective about how this system is built and how to navigate it. And I think that is dangerous enough to society at large and the patriarchal system that it's incumbent upon everybody to erase us and to silence us. And not just the cisgendered men that benefit from patriarchy, but literally everyone who benefits from the hierarchical nature of patriarchy, to include queer people within the queer community. So when we're asking, like, why are trans men silenced, it's often not because of misandry. It's because of misogyny. It's as if, oh, well, you pass as a man, so you got to sneak into the club and benefit, which is not true. Even if we pass, you know, because our conditioning is different. There's customs and courtesies that I don't fucking know, that I don't play along with, and I don't care to play along with, because I've never cared to play along with that shit. Even when they were just giving me an honorary dick degree for being a stud, I never played along with a lot of the games that cisgendered men play with each other. I don't know those customs and courtesies. I don't care to learn those customs and courtesies. I think a lot of trans men are like that. You have to make the choice. Either you're going to follow along with the program or you're not. And there are some of us that have always been outside of the fucking program. So it doesn't matter if I pass or not. Just by virtue of how I interact with people, they know I'm different. They know I'm queer. They know that I don't respond to things in the same way that they expect other men to respond to. You know? And it's like, that doesn't really give you as much safety as you think. And it's more nefarious in some ways because it removes even the possibility of existing in other people's imaginations. And all kinds of unsavory things can happen to you when you simply do not even exist in other people's imaginations. So yeah, I think because we live in a patriarchal society that hates women, a lot of people get to benefit from the erasure of trans men. A lot of people get to benefit from pretending that trans men just get to run off into the sunset because some of us pass. That's a false narrative that doesn't really ring out to be true, you know, when it comes to the society that we're living in.